Welcome to our 8th and final Driven by Purpose episode for the 2020-2021 academic year. Today we will hear from Randy Jones, Grady College graduate, author, and serial entrepreneur. Randy is currently chairman and CEO of American Idea Lab, a family office holding company specializing in early stage transformational technology investments. He currently serves as Vice Chair of Amtricity, a technology startup deploying sustainable solid-state battery energy storage innovation, helping to power the green electrification movement. He previously served as COO, Managing Director, Chief Talent Officer, and Portfolio Board Director of Patriarch Partners, a New York-based holding company. He is the former publisher of Esquire magazine, where he took the helm at 29 years of age. He is the founder of Worth magazine and author of The Greatest Stock Picks of All Time. Randy also founded The American Benefactor, the first magazine about philanthropy from a donor's perspective. We will hear about much of this, as well as insights from his best-selling book, The Richest Man in Town, The 12 Commandments of Wealth, in which he shares tips from 100 interviews with wealthy individuals. Amari Tillman, a graduate student in our Advertising and Public Relations master's degree program, will moderate the discussion with Randy. Now I'll turn over the program to Amari.
Thank you, Dr. Weber, and thank you, Randy, for joining us today. Wow, you have accomplished a lot in your lifetime as a best-selling author, CEO, entrepreneur, philanthropist, the list goes on. So what are you up to these days? What does being driven by purpose look like in your life right now?
Thank you, Amari. It's great to be here, and it's great to be in the UGA world today. What am I up to right now? Three things, really. First, Dr. Weber mentioned Amtricity, which is a company that I'm co-founding with 5 international partners to try to take advantage of the electrification of everything that is taking place right now. It's a green tech offering of a solid state battery technology that we think is absolutely breakthrough and will sort of redefine the way in which we receive electricity, store electricity, and preserve electricity. So that's exciting. The second thing I'm working on is I'm still a big believer in talent and talent acquisition, because I always say in the turnaround world or in the startup world, if you get the talent, you get the turnaround. If you get the right talent, that startup becomes a mainstream business. So I'm still helping some former Patriarch companies and some other companies find the right talent to fuel their future growth. And then the third thing I'm doing is renovating my house in Georgia, trying to get a little work done on a house that we've owned for 20 years and has sat here with too frequent guests, meaning us. And it's nice to be back in Georgia and spending a lot more time here. So those are the big three. And then there's one other that sort of popped up a week ago, where I was contacted by a former publisher of mine who said, Randy, what do you think about revisiting The Richest Man in Town by interviewing the wealth builders of this new economy? So I'm thinking about it. But right now, I've got a lot on my plate, so much for retirement, huh?
Right. And we're happy to have you down here in Georgia. And now that you mention it, we have to talk about The Richest Man in Town. I recommend everyone read your book. It has a lot of depth, and yet it's still concise and engaging. So what inspired you to write The Richest Man in Town? What was that experience like?
Well, it goes back now almost 20 years. We were doing the 10th anniversary issue of Worth, and we were trying to come up with, one of those great best-selling list approaches. And of course, Fortune had the 500 largest corporations, and Forbes had the 400 richest Americans. And so my team and I sat down and we said, how can we come up with something that captures the interest and imagination of our audience in a great list format? And we came up with nothing. That weekend, I came home to Carrollton, Georgia, scratching my head about what we were going to do for the 10th anniversary issue. And I go to the country club, and I'm having lunch with my then 14-year-old nephew. And we're having a pleasant time. And then suddenly he stops and he says, "Uncle Randy, you see that man over there? That's the richest man in town." Well, of course, it was someone that I grew up with and actually knew, but it hit me like a light bulb that that's the concept. Every town has one. And in most cases, folks within that town know who that is. So I went back to New York and told the team, this is what we should do. An issue called The Richest Person in Town. And we did. We researched, we wrote many profiles on 100 Americans in 100 American towns, the 100 largest American towns at the time. And the issue came out, it was a huge success. Everybody loved it except me. I felt we fell short of what we could actually accomplish, because while we did a great research project and while we did highlight the careers of 100 pretty extraordinary individuals, we did nothing in terms of sitting down and learning the secrets to their success. Nor did we distinguish between inherited wealth and self-made, or what I call in the book, self-sufficient wealth. And those are the people that fascinate me most. And so it bothered me for many years until I sat down to do the book, to actually make it right. And this time to go out and access the richest man or woman in 100 American towns that was truly self-made, that didn't have that sort of inheritance advantage. And I loved this project. It was one of the most fascinating 2 years of my entire career.
Yeah, and you mentioned this idea of being self-made. So what would be your take on entrepreneurial spirit maybe today versus then?
I wouldn't say it's changed dramatically in the last almost 13 years, Amari. What I would say is that self-made or self-sufficient success is by its very nature entrepreneurial. Most of these individuals started a business and by sheer hard work and determination made great successes of those business, and therefore they got the commensurate financial rewards. And so that really hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed, I think, in the last decade or so is that the wealthy are getting wealthy much sooner and at a much earlier age, which I think is a wonderful thing. Because one of the things I wanted to do with The Richest Man in Town was paint the most democratic portrait of wealth creation in America. Because so often we view wealth through the lenses of New York or Hollywood. And we forget about towns like Athens, Georgia, and Carrollton, Georgia, and Paducah, Kentucky, and Meridian, Mississippi. And yet all of those towns have great success stories and almost always one seismic success story that has some great wisdom to share. And that's what I tried to do in The Richest Man in Town. And that's why I sort of loved that tour of duty, because I was able to meet so many extraordinary people. And most of them I really liked.
And I really liked how you touched on this idea of success being accessible, and it's something that can happen in different locations, different towns, and there is that possibility for that. And I want to talk more about your thoughts on making a difference, because you've had such an expansive career that has impacted a lot of people. So what did making a difference mean to you working with Worth Magazine, for example, for over a decade versus working with Amtricity now? Like, what challenges did you face in that pursuit of change?
Sure. I've always believed in doing whatever I could do uh, to make a difference. I remember back to the Esquire days for our 50th anniversary issue. It was called 50 Who Made a Difference, and we looked at the 50 individuals who over the last 50 years had the most and the most positive effect on how we lived life and perceived life. So I've always wanted to do something that shows that there's a greater purpose than just acquiring wealth. So today, as an example, at Amtricity, you know, one of my fascinations for many, many years has been a concern about climate change. So I wanted in these next few years of my life to devote the majority of my time to figuring out how I, and with the help of my partners, can help to change the way climate change is so negatively affecting us and our futures. And we found this technology that we think can do that. So now it's all about deploying that technology, proving its efficacy, and making a difference. You know, when I was founding Worth, I wanted to make a difference in people's financial lives, and I also wanted to help them sort of focus on how they viewed money more as a means to an end, that end being a richer, fuller, more fascinating life, not simply about, creating wealth for wealth's sake. So that was the purpose for that. And I think virtually every business I've ever been involved with has been driven by purpose and that deep desire to make a difference if possible, and not simply just to make money and create a financial success. So I think when any business is powered by that sort of belief structure, I think you've got a greater chance of being successful. Now, I think as you and I discussed the other day when we had a short chat, my life and my career has not been this straight shot upward. It's looked much more like an electrocardiogram, and I think that's true for most humans as we try to plot our course in this life. I've had many, many highs and I've had many, many lows, but at the end of the day, it's all about learning from both. And also, when you hit one of those lows and have one of those unfortunate situations or one of those life learning lessons, then that's when you have to learn to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get rolling again, and never let those negative moments define what can happen in your future.
Yeah, something that has really struck me about you is your work ethic, that ability to keep pushing, keep going, come up with ideas, come up with a way to get through whatever it is that you're facing to get to your end goal. And it's incredible, quite frankly, with all that you've been able to accomplish. So, how did you develop your work ethic, and how did you go about instilling a good work ethic in your sons?
Amari, I don't think I developed my work ethic. I think it was innate. Um, I grew up on sort of a working farm, in Western Georgia. I had parents that had strong work ethics, and I think I didn't have much choice in that in a lot of ways. So I don't know anything different. I have tried to retire twice in my life, and I have failed miserably because I have to get up every day and feel like I'm doing something that's interesting, exciting, and making a difference. So I think it was in me. I think it was in my DNA. And so I thank my parents for that. Have I instilled it in my children? Again, I don't think that's really possible. I hope they got a little bit of their grandparents' DNA. And I think they did, because all three are working and doing quite well themselves. They are what I call practicing their perfect pitch. And I know we're going to talk about that a little later. So I feel like I'm a very lucky man that has become a fact in my life.
Yeah, well, we've actually titled this session Driven by Purpose, Finding the Perfect Pitch. So what is the perfect pitch? And do you have any advice to give students who are just beginning their journey and want to have the success that you have?
Absolutely. I always say to anyone with ADD or a short attention span, if you only read one chapter in The Richest Man in Town, read chapter number 2, which is called Practicing Your Perfect Pitch. And what that means is doing the thing or things that are most innate, instinctive, intrinsically inside you. It's putting the wind to your back. I always say, so often parents tell their kids they can be anything they want to be when they grow up. Well, I disabused people of that notion. I don't believe you can be anything you want to be. I wanted to be a great basketball player. I did not get the same athletic gene that my little brother got, darn it, and I'll never forgive him. But I think once I realized what I was good at, it was a whole lot easier to be a success and to do something that captured my own interest and imagination. So I will tell you that in interviewing 100 people across this country for The Richest Man in Town, what I found was that almost to a person, they were doing just that. They were practicing their perfect pitch, the thing they do most innately, intrinsically well. And it does, and it did put the wind to their back, so that you're going to have the inevitable failures. You're going to meet roadblocks along the way. But if you're doing something that comes innately well to you, you're going to have a much easier chance of being a great success. So I will give you an example of how one of the richest men in town realized this himself. He said that this was Jonathan Nelson, the richest man in Providence, Rhode Island, and a huge private equity investor today. But he said when he was in college at Brown University, he decided that he would take an easy course, music appreciation, because he thought, hey, I can get a good grade. I might meet some interesting ladies, and won't this be a great way to spend a spring semester? So he got into the class, and on the first day, the professor was talking about recognition of notes, and he played a note on the piano and said, what note is that? And one lady in front of him raised her hand and said, that's a C sharp. And he's thinking, how did she know that? And then he looks around and he sees about a quarter of the people in the music appreciation class had their hand up, indicating that they knew what note that was. And he had no idea. He said, how did they know that? He raised his hand and then asked the professor. And the professor said, well, perhaps you should ask one of the folks who raised their hand. And the young lady in front of him said, I know that note because I have perfect pitch. And he realized at that time that that was something he would never have. He was never going to be as good a music appreciation student as those 25% of the people in the class who raised their hand knowing that it was a C sharp. And that became a critical lesson for him in building his own success. He looked at what he could do well, that came naturally to him, as opposed to being like Sisyphus trying to push the boulder up the mountain only to see it cascade back down. You're working hard. You've got a great work ethic. You have great determination. You want to succeed. But you know what? That boulder weighs more than you do, and gravity is against you. So there's certain things in life that just are not going to be your perfect pitch. So don't try to be that. And it happens a lot in certain cultures where certain professions are prized, and parents are drilling into their kids all along. You'll be a good doctor, you'll be a good lawyer. I even remember in my own life people telling me that you'll be a lawyer, and then my parents being a little disappointed when I went to journalism school. But I said, no, but it's all about communication. And, if I choose to go to law school after journalism school, that makes all the sense in the world. That calmed them down for a little bit until I didn't become a lawyer, or didn't go to law school at all. But I think, what happened to me was, I fell into the right situation where I was practicing my perfect pitch. And that was so true in the formative years of my career at Esquire. And I think it's why I was able to do and succeed relatively young in my career, because I was practicing my perfect pitch. Esquire was the first magazine that I ever subscribed to at the ripe old age of 12 or 13, when using my own lawn cutting money to buy that magazine, because it was my window into a more sophisticated, more erudite world. And to this day, I still love the works of Hemingway and Dos Passos and the great writers that I read through the pages of Esquire. And still to this day, I love a well-tailored suit, the clothing that I saw in that magazine. So it was really a way I could live my profession. And I think when someone can do that, it's really a beautiful thing. Then you are, in fact, practicing your perfect pitch.
I love that. Yeah, knowing yourself and knowing what you're good at, I think that's incredibly important. And well, that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you again for joining us, Randy. And now we're going to have a couple closing remarks from Dr. Weber to take us out.
Thank you, Amari. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you, Randy and Amari, for an interesting discussion on being driven by purpose. And thanks, viewers, for joining us. Rewatch this episode or any of the 7 preceding episodes at our Driven by Purpose website. Simply search Driven by Purpose and UGA. Watch for new Driven by Purpose episodes in the fall as we talk about how organizations and individuals do better when they do good, when they're driven by purpose. From the University of Georgia Department of Advertising and Public Relations, bye for now.